Peace. This is Marcel Malakibu, and this is the To Be Named podcast that still doesn't have a name and doesn't necessarily even require one. This week I want to talk about some stuff. It may not appeal to you if you're overly concerned about the Epstein files and things of that nature. There's quite a bit to that. It will involve someone related to that, but I want to piggyback off of last week's topic about the sort of harm of social media to youth with another story that I saw come up this week. So I'm going to go ahead and play this tape. This is from the Spanish Prime Minister. He's discussing the banning of social media platforms for people under the age of 16 in Spain. And I think it's kind of interesting.
Starting next week, my government will implement the following actions. First, we will change the law in Spain to hold platform executives legally accountable for many infringements taking place on their sites. Second, we will turn algorithmic manipulation and amplification of illegal content into a new criminal offense. Third, we will implement a hate and polarization footprint, a system to track, quantify, and expose how digital platforms fuel division and amplified hate. Fourth, Spain will ban access to social media for minors under the age of 16. Fifth, and last, my government will work with our public prosecutor to investigate and pursue the infringement committed by Grok, TikTok, and Instagram.
So obviously this is a big decision to make for Spain, but Spain is not the first country to implement this sort of ban. We have Australia, who was, I believe, the first to impose a ban for children under the age of 16. And now I think it was, last week, the lower house in the French parliament had voted in favor of banning children aged below 15 years from social media as well. And I wanted to read a couple things from Al Jazeera. It says the lower house of the French parliament has voted in favor of banning children aged below 15 years from social media amid growing concerns about online bullying and mental health risks. I wanted to read just some quotes. You can look at this article. It's on aljazeera.com. It says the emotions of our children and teenagers are not for sale or to be manipulated either by American platforms or Chinese algorithms. That's what President Macron said, the President Emmanuel Macron said. There was a quote from the it says centrist lawmaker Laura Miller. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Laura Miller, who presented the bill, and she said, "Our children are reading less, sleeping less, and comparing themselves to one another more. This is a battle for free minds." And I thought it was really interesting that this is a battle for free minds. You know, when it comes to children and the use of social media, people have their opinions, but the thing is that we all go to, various family functions. We go out to restaurants, we see this, and people are absorbed in the phone. Even us, millennials, a lot of us are absorbed in the phone. I use my phone a lot during the day, and I have to consciously make decisions to separate myself from the phone. And I notice when it is, pulling me back in, or when I'm scrolling on Instagram or scrolling on any kind of platform, especially when I had TikTok, it was so easy to just continually scroll and scroll and scroll. And, not only is it, comparison, not only is it unhealthy, to sit on your behind all day, or to scroll and have the text neck. And, we're in a different time now. Yes, there are still builders, there are still, physical laborers, but there's a lot of soft skill workers and, people with technical jobs that, maybe sit in a lab and they're craned over, or, sit at a desk and a computer. And so it's not healthy for us to be on the phones. But in addition to the some of the things that are highlighted in some of these articles, is that the algorithm pushes, you know, antithetical information to you. It pushes basically negative shit that you wouldn't otherwise want to see, but it knows that it's engaging you, it's pissing you off. Maybe you get in the comments, maybe you put a dislike or something like that. And I noticed that it would, my some of my algorithms would just continually show me stuff that I was either disgusted with or didn't want. um and so I can only imagine how much it's hurting the psyche of children when I know how much it's affecting us, just like last week's conversation. With this, uh, Spain's decision to ban social media for people under the age of 16. The other interesting thing was that Elon Musk came out and, obviously, yes, he is on the Epstein list, and, that's a whole nother conversation. But um, more importantly, he comes out and he responds and calls the prime minister of Spain a dirty Sanchez, and says that he's a traitor to his country. Um, and let me make sure I get the quote right. He says he's a tyrant and traitor to the people of Spain for introducing some of these new social media curves. Now, I, I don't like to stand necessarily on either side of whether or not, wholly that all of these changes regarding social media are right. But I will say that, there's a probe that's been going. So this story came out today about Elon Musk and his response, but there's been a probe into Elon Musk going on uh, over in Europe. And French authorities yesterday actually went and searched the Paris offices of Elon Musk's company that, formerly known as Twitter, went into the Paris office of X to go in, in regards to this ongoing investigation. They've been probing into Grok, the AI chatbot that exists within um, X, because of illicit, illegal, inappropriate generated images. That it's generating images of things that I don't want to mention here, because of the algorithm, but things involving young people in, that are inappropriate, and they're fake. So they're creating deep fake images of young people and women. And the European Commission has launched an investigation into Grok because of these kind of images. And they're not sure whether or not, X is, properly trying to take care of some of the risks that are associated with disseminating this illegal content. In fact, even the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, I think that's how you say it. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said Europe will, quote, not tolerate unthinkable behavior such as digital undressing of women and children. Oh, and she said it is simple. We will not hand over consent and child protection to tech companies to violate and monetize. The harm caused by illegal images is very real. Um, Grok is not the only AI chatbot. Grok is not the only AI chatbot that is dangerous. And so I do think that, yes, they are looking into Grok. They are looking into social media, but there are other forms of AI that are very problematic, that lie, that tell you what you want to hear, that can generate all sorts of different images. And so Grok is the one that's under the scope right now. So yeah, I mean, several different European Union nations, like I said, France, Greece, Denmark, have recently proposed or approved similar bans for users under the age of 15 due to concerns related to mental health and the addictive nature of algorithms. So, for me, it's kind of one of those things where if it doesn't mean that if everybody is doing something that that thing is necessarily right, but if this many nations are concerned about social media, I think we all should be concerned about social media. um and it seems quite obvious, but it and it is obvious to many of us, but at the same time, when I look around within my own life, my own family, um the use and addiction to algorithms and social media is very apparent. So we all know a whole bunch of stuff, but I don't see widespread, personal, addressing of the issue of addiction to social media and these algorithms, these AI chatbots, um, all the various pipelines that people can go down when they hop on X. I will say, I'm not gonna um, uh, 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 I'm not going to choose one social media platform over another to say that one is better. But in my experience, when I go on X, I do notice that it is one of the most heightened platforms in terms of showing me content that I don't want to see and showing explicit content. It is probably the top. So, with that investigation that's going on with the French police raiding the Paris office, I mean, it says that it was related to an investigation launched in last year, January of last year, in the allegations of biased algorithms and fraudulent data extraction by the platform. So those issues weren't even related to this Grok issue. Um, but now they have complaints about the artificial intelligence chatbot Grok, which is uh, built in part by uh, another corporation, a very large corporation that starts that rhymes with Boracle, um, and that they're going to include this Grok into this investigation because they say that it's part of the platform's complicity in a bunch of different potential crimes. Um, I thought about what questions really to ask, and I think first and foremost, like I said, there's many nations that are starting to ban social media under the age of 15, under the age of 16. Um, and the question is why? Why? I think Indonesia blocked Grok due to the risk of pornographic material made out of, pictures of, women and minors, and just in general deep fakes of people. Um, and it's deeper than just the deep fakes and things like that. It's that, when you have something that creates false images, it sick images, for one, just makes society more sick. The more we have sick images put into our brain, the harder it is to get those images out of your brain. I mean, it's common sense, and people tend to do what they see, not do what they see, but think about what they see, and and even if you don't do it, um uh, uh, someone else might. If 10 people watch something, one of those people might end up doing that thing or exacting violence if they watch a bunch of violence consistently. So, um, I think it's important that we look at the risk of this, and that we think about what is the potential risk of using a chatbot like Grok, and if our youth have access to it, what does that mean for them? Um, so I guess the question here is, why is it a trend in a whole bunch of nations? And should that trend swing this way? Should that trend come or be global? Should it be a global trend to address social media and the dangers of social media? What do you think? I think so, but what do you think? And the last thing I really just wanted to think about or leave you with is, what are the ways in which you have seen this with the youth in your life and within yourself in your life? What are the effects of social media on your life that you can qualify and that you can quantify and say, hey, I spend X amount of, no pun intended, I spend X amount of hours on social media a day. I find myself scrolling on TikTok instead of talking to my children. Um, I find myself irritated in the morning. I scroll and then I'm irritated and I go to work or I do this or do that and I can't focus. Um, I want to know how this is impacting people. It's like, is it just me? Sometimes I go to restaurants and things like that. And I look around and nobody around me is not on their phone. And it's funny because a lot of times I eat alone. I eat alone a lot of the time. I know there's a book that says never eat alone. But I don't agree with that book. I think it's great to eat alone a lot. And I don't think you have to be around other people all the time to make money or to enjoy yourself when you're eating. Um, and so when I eat alone a lot, I sit and I often don't have my phone out. There's times where I do, and I'm usually listening to something in one ear. Um, but I am very cognizant when I look around of how many people are completely absorbed into the devices, into the screens. And um, with adults, I tend to kind of say, hey, it is what it is. You kind of set in your ways, or, maybe you're just doing this. If it's at the airport, you might just be bored. This might not be what you normally do. It's not like you could go skateboarding in the airport. It's not like you could go rock climbing in the airport. But with the youth, it concerns me. On the plane, it's kind of like, yeah, it's 2 hours, they're 3 years old, a tablet, playing tic-tac-toe or some shit like that might be okay. But when you're at home, you went to school, the child went to school, they had a Chromebook, they did all their modules on the Chromebook. They've been sort of like standardized to be used to that now. They're looking at a whiteboard, not a blackboard chalkboard anymore. And then they get home and nobody wants to deal with them. So then they're on the screen. And 2, 3 hours later, you feed them, they're watching TV while they're eating. Nobody's eating at the dinner table anymore. And then after dinner, you let them watch movie or, Roblox or some shit like that. And I got into more of the effects of it last week. This week, I'm talking more about the public response to these platforms, but depression, lack of attention, lack of being able to look others in the eye. Autism rates are very high already, and so by handing a kid who's on the spectrum or whatever just a screen and not at least trying to get them a little bit more acclimated to people, sometimes I see the effects of that. Like I see the effects of that where the child already has sensory issues, and then that's pretty much all you can do. And it's not a condemnation. I'm just wondering, what are these effects? What are we doing? And what do you think we should do? Personally, I like to take a little bit of time away from the screens. I like to, take the kids out. I like to engage in painting or different art activities and music and getting up, or using the screens in the YouTube to do like an exercise with the kids. Get up and do the exercise with them. Sometimes I'm too tired, but for the most part, I'll get up and at least do a couple of the exercises with them so that they're engaged when they're looking at a screen and they're still doing something physical or doing a workout or whatever. And that's not to say they don't get any screen time. It's just I'm concerned about it, And so I think I'll leave you with this. I think we do need to take some steps. And though this might be politicized, it might be political, it might be, a bit of a witch hunt. I think that it's good for these uh, uh, states to take a stance and try to put up some guardrails. In Australia, when they had the ban, they acknowledged that it would be bumpy. They acknowledged that the ban would be bumpy after children who claim to be younger than 16 years old flooded the social media with messages gloating about their ability to access the network, right? So, of course, kids are going to find a way, but I do think it's good to take a stance and have public stances. It's kind of like you have a law against murder. It doesn't mean no one will murder anyone. But I think when you have laws that restrict things and you take a stance on what you think is right or wrong, even though, morals are shift depending on the situation, um, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a step in the right direction. So you can go down in the comments and tell me what you think. But I really want to know, what are some ways that you see this in the people around you, and what do you think we can do to combat it?